Hello and welcome to British English with Alexandre. Wherever you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today we're gonna be talking about another unit. This is Unit 19 of our Advanced British English course. Actually, there's a playlist in the channel. Please, by the way, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel to help it grow. In order to help English learners improve their English, bringing it to the next level. I try to show through that method that you can improve your vocabulary to thousands and thousands of words. It has been proved to me, believe me. You can improve your pronunciation, you can learn grammar in an easy way. You can learn connected speech, alliteration, elision, all of those things that people try to English teachers try to teach English learners, but you can learn all of that through only one exercise. By the way, I'd like to share that grammar book, my preferred English book. This is the one I like the most. This is Advanced Grammar in Use. This is a self-study reference and practice book for advanced learners of English by Martin Hewings from our renowned Cambridge University. Yeah, basically we're gonna be talking about those advanced lessons so you can improve your English, so you can understand English texts and stuff in an easy way. Okay. Without any further ado, let's go straight, as I said, onwards and upwards to that lesson. Okay, in that section of those lessons, we're talking about modals and semi-modals, modal and semi-modal verbs. Those verbs are really important to be understood. So, you can understand an English text, an English magazine, a news article, etc. You might even be able to understand a report from our BBC News, our British Broadcasting Corporation, which is actually about proper and updated English. Okay, so here we have the verb to need. So we have the expressions needn't, with the abbreviation for need not, needn't, needn't. Remember that expression, needn't, needn't. It's most of the time in its negative form. So observe that particular observation, needn't, in its negative form. Then we have don't need to, and don't have to. Okay, so what are the differences? When to use needn't, when to use don't need to, and when to use don't have to. That's exactly what we're gonna be talking about in that lesson. Okay, let's go through section A. Okay, we can use need as an ordinary or a modal verb. So we might have an ordinary, or a modal verb. So the verb need have two classes. It might be an ordinary verb or a modal verb. We're gonna check that out. Followed by a bare infinitive. As a modal verb, it doesn't change its tense and it doesn't add s for the third person singular. Compare. I needed to leave early. Or she's thirsty. She needs a drink. When you say she needs a drink or I need a drink, there's a variation to the verb. So we add s to need. So when we add s or we make a variation to the verb, it means that it's being used in its ordinary way. So in that case, she's thirsty. She needs a drink. This is the ordinary verb. Or, for example, and you needn't speak so loudly. You needn't speak so loudly. It is in its negative form. You needn't speak so loudly. This is a modal verb. Otherwise, you would say, you don't need to speak so loudly. But no, remember, this is a modal verb, so it doesn't allow variation in its form. So we've got, I needed to leave early. This is in the past, so I changed the verb to need. I put it in the past. So this is an ordinary verb. I needed to leave early. Or she's thirsty, she needs a drink. So we put the need verb in the past with ed, and we put the need in the present according to the third person. She needs, I need, you need, he needs, she needs, it needs. So we make all the variations. So when the verb need is with its adaptations, we're considering its ordinary way. But when it is in that needn't way or need, we're gonna see other examples. It's in its modal form. This is a modal verb. Okay, let's move on. When it is a modal verb, need is most commonly used in negative sentences. So remember, in most cases, most commonly, it is used in its negative sentence, in its negative ways. For example, I've already cleaned the car, so you needn't bother to do it. And notice that after needn't, which is a modal verb, the following verb is in its bare form. We can't put, for example, you needn't to bother. No, because this is a modal verb. So the next verb has to be in its bare form. This is a bare infinitive because before it we have a modal verb, needn't in particular. So again, I've already cleaned the car, so you needn't bother to do it. Okay, another example. I was very nervous before the interview, but I needn't have you worried, I got the job. I was very nervous before the interview, but I needn't have you worried, I got the job. So this is the modal needn't again. Modal needn't. So again, need can be an ordinary verb or a modal verb. When it's with its variations in the past or in the present with the adaptations for the personal pronouns, we're dealing with an ordinary verb. And when it is in its unchangeable form, the form that it doesn't allow the addition of ed in the past or doesn't allow to infinitive in front of it, we're dealing with the modal verb. Okay, let's move on. Those are some other verbs often used with need not or needn't, the modal verb. For example, the verbs apply, concern, fear, involve, mean, and panic. Okay, moving on. It is sometimes used in questions, but we prefer to use need as an ordinary verb or have to. For example, need you go so soon? This is a modal verb, of course, because we're not using the auxiliary. This is a modal verb. Need you go so soon? Modal verb. Less common and rather formal, of course. Now, do you need to go so soon? So notice that we're using the auxiliary verb to add need to the sentence. So this is an auxiliary verb to the ordinary need verb. So this is in its ordinary form. This is an ordinary verb. Or for example, In another case, do you have to go so soon? Do you need to go so soon? Do you have to go so soon? That is, being an ordinary verb, we use all the auxiliary verbs we need to construct the interrogation. Okay, moving on. It is rarely used in affirmative sentences, that is, not questions or negatives, but is sometimes found in written English, particularly in fiction. Another example, we need to have no fear for Nicole. She can take care of herself. Of course, in that case, we have need as a modal verb because the following verb is in its infinitive form, but without to. It's in its bare form. We need have no fear for Nicole. She can take care of herself. Okay, moving on. In other styles of formal written English, it's used in this way with negative words such as hardly, never, nobody, no one, and only. For example, the changes need only be small to make the proposals acceptable. Less formally, the changes only need to be small to make the proposals acceptable. Okay, so in that case, we're using the first example. We've got a modal verb. The changes need only be small, that is, without to. The changes need only be small, not the changes need only to be small, because this is a modal verb, so it doesn't change its form. The changes need only be small to make the proposals acceptable. Now, I might remake the sentence less formally, using the verb need as an ordinary verb. In that case, it would be like, the changes only need to be small to make the proposals acceptable. Sorry, the changes only need to be small to make the proposals acceptable. In the second example, need is an ordinary verb, not a modal verb like in the previous example. Another example, nobody ever need to know about the money. Nobody ever need know about the money. This is a modal verb because it's followed by a bare infinitive and it doesn't change its form. Nobody ever need to know. Nobody ever need to know about the money. Now, if I want to put it in a less formal way, less formally, for example, nobody ever needs to know. Oops. Need now has an S and it's followed by a to infinitive. So I know, you know now, that this is not a modal verb. Need in that case is in its ordinary way. Again, let's continue. I don't want my parents to know. They need never find out. Again, they need never. We don't have to, so we have a bare infinitive, and it's followed by a verb without to. The verb here doesn't change, so this is a modal or an ordinary verb? A modal. Yeah, I expect you've got it right. But if I want to put it less formally, I might say they never need to find out. They never need. Now, following need, we have to find in its infinitive form. So in that second example, less formally, we're using need as a ordinary verb, of course. You get the idea. Okay, moving on. Section B now. To give permission not to do something, we can use either needn't modal or don't need to. Ordinary need in that case. For example, you needn't cut the grass, I'll do it later. You needn't cut the grass, I'll do it later. Needn't, of course, modal verb. You needn't cut the grass, because it's followed by a bare infinitive, and needn't is a modal verb. I do it later. Or you don't need to cut the grass. You don't need to cut the grass. Need in that case is followed by a to infinitive, it doesn't change its form, so in that case need is an ordinary verb, not a modal verb. Alright, let's move on. To talk about a general necessity, we prefer don't need to. For example, you don't need to be over 18 to get into a nightclub. You don't need to be over 18 to get into a nightclub. This is an ordinary verb, of course, followed by a to infinitive and allowing all of its variations. You don't need to be over 18 to get into a nightclub. Let's move on to section C. Alright, we can often use either needn't or modal verb, or don't have to, ordinary verb, with a little difference in meaning to say that it is unnecessary to do something. For example, you needn't whisper, nobody can hear us. You needn't whisper, nobody can hear us. Again, needn't, in that case, modal verb. It doesn't change its form. It doesn't present variations. It's not followed by to infinitive, but by infinitive. You needn't whisper, nobody can hear us. But alternatively, if you don't want to use a modal verb, in that case, you might say, you don't have to whisper, you don't have to whisper, nobody can hear us, nobody can hear us. Alright, moving on. However, some people prefer needn't modal verb when it is the speaker who decides the lack of necessity, and don't have to when somebody else or external rules make something unnecessary. Compare. As you worked late yesterday, you needn't come in until 10 tomorrow morning. The speaker's decision using needn't modal verb. As you worked late yesterday, you needn't come. Notice the following verb without the to in its bare form. You needn't come in until 10 tomorrow morning. The speaker's decision. This is the modal need in its negative form, of course. And we've been told that we don't have to be at work until 10 tomorrow. We're reporting someone else's decision. So we might use don't have to. Okay, moving on to section D. We can use needn't modal or don't have to, ordinary expression, to say that something is not necessarily true. We don't use mustn't in this way. For example, volcanoes needn't erupt constantly to be classified as active. Or volcanoes don't have to erupt constantly to be classified as active. Okay, initially we use needn't with a modal verb. Remember, you can't put to after it. It has to be followed by a bare infinitive, in that case to erupt. Volcanoes needn't erupt constantly to be classified as active. Or volcanoes don't have to erupt. This is an ordinary verb, so we use the variations and not the bare verb after that. Another example, nowadays it needn't cost a fortune to own an e-book reader. Nowadays it needn't cost a fortune to own an e-book reader. Again, needn't, a modal verb followed by a bare infinitive. The verb doesn't change. Or nowadays it doesn't have to cost a fortune to own an e-book reader. This is an ordinary expression with all of its variations and allowing, by the way, the to infinitive after that. Okay, and that brings us to the end of that lesson. I hope you've enjoyed the lesson. If not, go over it again. Just remember the important aspects of that unit. The first, needn't, it is generally, commonly in its negative way. Needn't, remember that, needn't, when you come across with the verb to need in generally commonly in its negative way, it is probably a modal verb. It will be actually a modal verb. So you might find it need in its positive way, and you might find it with not. Affirmative way and negative way. Nothing more. This is the only variation actually of the verb. It might be in the affirmative form or in the negative. It doesn't. We don't make any variations. We don't add the s. We don't add the ed to put it in the past. It's a modal verb. You get the idea. And then we have those ordinary expressions. We might use don't need to or need to, and in that case need is a normal verb. It's gonna be an ordinary verb to use, accepting all its variations. You might put it in the past, adding ed. You might add as to the third person in the present and the stuff. And also, if you got expression you don't have to, and you don't have to, you don't need to do something. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed it. Please share the content, subscribe to the channel to help it grow, to help English learners all over the world to improve their English and learn British grammar, which is extremely relevant so you can understand English. I hope you've enjoyed it. Have a lovely day. Cheers.